In the silent hours of night, President Trump's heartfelt visit to a military hospital, where he listened to the unspoken pains of forgotten heroes, sparked tears of hope, healing, and a promise of remembrance that could move anyone to tears. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and please complete our 1,000 subscribers for more inspiring stories. It was well past midnight when a convoy of black SUVs rolled up to the military hospital. The staff inside didn't pay much attention at first, assuming it was just another official inspection. The night was quiet, the usual hustle of daytime medical care replaced by the soft hum of machines and the occasional murmur of the night shift. But when President Donald Trump stepped out of the vehicle, flanked by his Secret Service detail, the air inside the hospital changed. Whispers spread like wildfire across the dimly lit corridors, an electric buzz of surprise and speculation. This visit was unlike any other. There were no cameras, no press, no staged photo opportunities. The nurses exchanged puzzled glances, wondering what could bring the president here in the dead of night. Trump adjusted his suit, his face set with a purpose that seemed to contrast with his usual public persona, and he walked into the hospital with a quiet determination. The hospital's chief physician, Dr. Amelia Harrington, who had been preparing for a night of routine checks, rushed forward. She was unsure of how to handle such an unexpected guest at this hour. Trump, however, preempted any formalities by raising his hand. "I'm not here for politics," he stated firmly. "I want to see the soldiers." The hospital's hallways were eerily silent, save for the occasional beep of heart monitors and the soft shuffling of nurses making their rounds. This was a sanctuary for those who had given everything for their country. Some bore physical scars, others had lost limbs, and many carried the invisible wounds of war, suffering in silence. Moving through the ward, Trump's gaze was solemn, scanning the faces of those who had once stood on the front lines. His presence was noted by a young nurse, Sarah, who had seen many politicians visit for publicity, but this felt different. Trump wasn't surrounded by advisors or giving a rehearsed speech. He seemed to be on a mission, looking for something or someone. He stopped at one particular bed where a young man lay, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. His name tag identified him as Private Kevin Mitchell, a double amputee. Kevin had lost both legs in a combat explosion that had also taken away his hope for the future. His girlfriend had left him, friends had moved on, and he felt utterly abandoned by the world. When he noticed Trump standing by his side, he sighed, the bitterness clear in his voice. "You don't have to pretend you care." But instead of leaving, Trump pulled up a chair right next to him. "Tell me your story," he said with an earnestness that seemed to pierce through Kevin's defenses. After a moment of hesitation, something in Trump's voice, a genuine interest, encouraged Kevin to speak. He shared his pain, his fears, the loneliness that haunted him, recounting the moment his life changed, the explosion, the pain, the nightmares, and the feeling of being discarded by the society he fought for. Trump listened intently, his expression one of empathy, not once interrupting. "Do you feel like your service meant nothing?" Trump asked after a while. Kevin clenched his jaw, his eyes reflecting a storm of emotions. "Sometimes, yeah," he admitted. Trump exhaled deeply, his face showing a shadow of regret. "That's a damn shame," he said, "because you're a hero, and this country should never forget that." For the first time since his injury, Kevin felt seen, acknowledged. Trump patted his shoulder, promising, "You're not alone. I won't let you be." Despite his initial skepticism, Kevin felt a glimmer of belief in Trump's words. Sarah, observing this interaction from a distance, felt her heart ache for Kevin. She had seen him at his lowest, rejecting visitors, turning away from life itself. She approached cautiously. "Mr. President," she said, her voice low, "there are others like Kevin here. Soldiers with no family, no one to remind them they matter." Trump's eyes met hers, sharp yet filled with understanding. "Then show me," he responded without hesitation. Sarah led him further into the ward, past beds filled with soldiers too weak or too disheartened to speak. One door stood out, the door to room 207. "He hasn't spoken to anyone in weeks," Sarah whispered. "He lost more than just his health." Trump nodded, his resolve clear. "Let's see him." Room 207 was dimly lit, with a single window framing the night sky. Inside, an older veteran, Colonel Robert Thompson, sat in his wheelchair, staring out at the darkness as if waiting for something or someone that would never come. Trump stepped inside, and Thompson barely acknowledged him. "Another visitor come to pity me?" he muttered, his voice dripping with cynicism. Trump sat down, folding his hands in his lap. "No pity, just respect," he clarified. Thompson turned, his eyebrow raised in skepticism. "Respect for what? For being too broken to serve?" His voice was bitter. Trump shook his head. "For giving everything you had, for raising a son who followed in your footsteps." At that, Thompson froze. His son, Major Samuel Thompson, had died in combat, his sacrifice barely recognized. "How do you know?" he whispered, his hands trembling as he spoke of his son, the hero who saved his unit at the cost of his life. "They called him a hero for a day," Thompson said, his voice cracking. "Then they forgot." Trump leaned forward, his voice firm. "I won't forget." Thompson scoffed, but there was something unyielding in Trump's tone that made him pause. "His name will be honored, I'll make sure of it," Trump promised. Thompson's hardened expression softened, his eyes glistening with tears. He had spent years consumed by grief, believing his son's sacrifice was lost to time, but now he felt a sliver of hope, a possibility that someone still cared. Trump then turned to the hospital staff. "I need a list," he said, his voice carrying a note of urgency. "Every fallen soldier with a struggling family, every veteran who's been forgotten." The staff hesitated. This wasn't the kind of request they were used to from politicians, but there was no denying the sincerity in his voice. One doctor, moved by the moment yet hesitant, spoke up. "We can do that, Mr. President." Trump nodded. "Then let's get to work." That night, he didn't just visit. He sat with doctors, listened to nurses, and wrote names down himself. He made phone calls, set up meetings, and began the groundwork for real change. For once, the soldiers weren't just numbers on a sheet. They were stories worth remembering. As he was leaving the ward, Trump noticed a small boy sitting on a bench in the hallway, clutching a worn-out teddy bear. His big, tired eyes locked onto Trump with a mix of curiosity and sadness. Trump stopped, kneeling to meet the boy's eye level. "What's your name, champ?" he asked softly. The boy hesitated before mumbling, "Ethan." His mother, with red, swollen eyes from crying, stepped forward. "His father, Captain Martinez, is in critical condition. We don't know if he'll make it." Trump glanced at the closed ICU door, then placed a reassuring hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Your dad's a fighter, and fighters don't give up," he said with conviction. Trump entered the dimly lit ICU where Captain Martinez lay, almost motionless, hooked up to machines that beeped rhythmically. The man looked fragile, just clinging to life. Trump pulled up a chair, leaning in close to speak softly. "Your son is waiting for you. You've given everything for this country. It's time we give something back." The room was silent except for the steady heartbeat on the monitor. As if responding to Trump's words, Martinez's eyelids fluttered, a single tear slipping down his cheek. A nurse gasped. He hadn't shown any sign of movement in days. Trump patted his hand, whispering, "Hang in there." That night, against all odds, Martinez's condition began to stabilize. Before leaving, Trump handed Ethan's mother a sealed envelope. "Open this when you're ready," he said. Confused, she clutched it, watching as he walked away. Hours later, when she finally unfolded the letter, her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't a formal document, but a personal handwritten note from Trump. It spoke of gratitude for her husband's service, encouragement for Ethan's future, and a promise, a full scholarship for Ethan's education. Alongside the note was a signed order for financial support for struggling military families. Tears streamed down her face. It wasn't just a letter, it was hope, a lifeline in their darkest hour. The hospital visit left Trump deep in thought as he returned to the White House that very night. Instead of resting, he made calls, spoke with lawmakers, advisors, and military officials, drafting new initiatives for veterans, better health care, mental health resources, and full scholarships for children of fallen soldiers. The next morning, his staff was stunned by his urgency. "We need action," Trump declared, holding up the papers. "These men and women gave everything. Now it's our turn." His team scrambled to put things in motion. Meanwhile, word of Trump's hospital visit quietly spread among the military community. Even though there was no official press coverage, the soldiers had seen something real that night, something that couldn't be faked. Days passed, and the impact of Trump's visit became evident. Soldiers at the hospital, once feeling forgotten, found themselves receiving unexpected calls from support organizations. Veterans who had struggled for years suddenly received assistance, but Trump refused to turn it into a political spectacle. When asked by reporters about military funding changes, he simply said, "It's the right thing to do." Sarah, the nurse, couldn't believe it. She had expected the visit to be a fleeting moment, just another appearance, but now she witnessed real changes happening. "He actually meant what he said," she whispered to a colleague. For the first time in a long time, hope began to spread through the halls of the hospital like a gentle, healing breeze. Late at night, Trump sat alone in the Oval Office, staring at a photograph he had been given at the hospital. Colonel Robert Thompson's son, Samuel, in uniform. He traced the edges of the picture, deep in thought. Samuel had been a hero, yet few knew his name. Trump opened his desk drawer where he had placed a small stack of names, soldiers whose sacrifices he had learned about during his visit. He whispered under his breath, "I won't forget you." The weight of responsibility bore down on him. Amidst all the political battles he faced daily, this was what truly mattered, and he vowed to carry their stories with him. Months later, Sarah found herself drafting a letter she never thought she'd write. She had seen firsthand how one night had changed everything in the hospital. Soldiers who once felt forgotten now had support, hope, and resources they never had before, all because a president had shown up not for cameras, not for votes, but simply because he cared. She sealed the envelope and sent it to the White House, not expecting a reply. After all, he was the president. Surely he had more important matters to attend to. But what happened next stunned her. One morning, Sarah received an official-looking envelope with the White House seal. With trembling hands, she opened it. Inside was a handwritten note from Trump himself. "Sarah, the real heroes are people like you, the ones who never stop fighting for these soldiers. Thank you for what you do. You inspire more than you know." Enclosed with the note was something even more astonishing. A signed bill improving military hospital conditions nationwide. Her breath caught. This wasn't just words on paper. It was real, tangible change. She clutched the letter to her chest, overwhelmed. The world might never know the full story of that night at the hospital, but she did, and that was enough. Months later, an unexpected event took place at the White House. A private gathering was held, and veterans from across the country were invited. No media, no political speeches, just a quiet, heartfelt event. Among them was Colonel Robert Thompson, who had struggled with grief for years. As he shook Trump's hand, he whispered, "You kept your promise." Trump nodded solemnly. Kevin Mitchell, the young soldier who had once given up on life, was also there, now leading a support group for wounded veterans. "I'm alive because of that night," he admitted. Trump simply patted his shoulder. Sometimes the most powerful moments needed no words. Kevin never thought he'd find purpose again. But after that night at the hospital, everything changed. Inspired by Trump's words, he started reaching out to other veterans, forming a support group. What began as a small circle of wounded soldiers sharing their struggles soon grew into something bigger, a national movement helping thousands. News outlets eventually caught on, but Kevin always traced it back to one conversation. "He made me believe I wasn't worthless," he told reporters. "That's why I'm still here." His redemption became a beacon of hope for others, proving that even in the darkest moments, a single act of kindness could change everything. A year later, Trump returned to the military hospital, this time not as a stranger but as a familiar face. Soldiers who had once been hopeless now sat up with smiles. Kevin, in his wheelchair, was talking to new patients, offering them the same hope he had received. Sarah greeted Trump at the entrance, her eyes shining with gratitude. "You did more than visit," she said. "You changed lives." Trump smiled but shook his head. "They changed mine too." As he walked through the halls, he stopped at Captain Martinez's room. The soldier, now recovered, saluted him. "I made it," he said with a smile. Trump gripped his hand. "I never doubted you." As Trump prepared to leave, Colonel Robert Thompson stood, his cane trembling slightly. Then, in a slow, deliberate motion, he raised his hand in a salute. One by one, the other soldiers followed, even those in wheelchairs, saluting as best they could. The doctors, the nurses, the staff, everyone stood in solemn respect. It wasn't about politics, it wasn't about power, it was about something deeper: honor, gratitude, and the recognition of sacrifices that could never be repaid. As Trump turned to leave, Sarah wiped away a tear. In the quiet hum of the hospital, one thing was clear: no one would ever forget that night. This visit had not only touched the lives of those within the hospital walls, but had sparked a movement that would echo through the hearts of many, reminding all of the silent heroes who continue to fight long after the battle's end. The story of that night, the sincerity, the connection, and the promise of change, would become a legend among those who served, a testament to what can happen when compassion meets action in the corridors of power. Thank you for watching till the end video. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, don't hesitate to like the video and share it with your friends too. Subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell for more fascinating stories.